Jake was the embodiment of modern corporate success, impeccable, relentless, and isolated in his own tower of glass and steel. From the height of his panoramic office on the top floor of Skyline, he watched the city sprawled below like a chessboard, where each piece moved according to his rules. His fortune was vast, his power unquestionable, but his soul, if he still had one, was as cold and impenetrable as the polished marble of his lobby. For Jake, the world was a series of transactions, and people mere resources to be optimized or discarded. Empathy was a weakness, and emotion an unnecessary noise. He had built an empire, but in the process, he had become a solitary emperor, surrounded by sycophants and rivals, yet devoid of any genuine human connection. On a particularly gray afternoon, Jake was on a video call, the image of a trembling mid-level manager on the screen before him. The man, a 10-year veteran at the company, had made a trivial mistake that cost Skyline a negligible amount, but in Jake's view, it represented an unacceptable failure in his pursuit of perfection. Without a hint of hesitation or any sign of acknowledgement for the service rendered, Jake uttered the cold and definitive words, "Your services are no longer needed. Thank you for your time." The man's face turned pale, and he tried to argue, but Jake had already ended the call, his expression unchanged. He turned to the window, watching the traffic below, completely oblivious to the despair he had just inflicted. To him, it was just another piece removed from the board, a necessary adjustment to keep the machine running perfectly. Life, after all, was a zero-sum game, and Jake always played to win, no matter the human cost. His tower of ice, though imposing, was also his prison, a monument to his own loneliness and his unshakable belief that power was the only currency that mattered. While Jake orchestrated destinies from the height of his tower, on the ground floor of the Skyline, Sam, the janitor, moved almost invisibly. His days were filled with the steady rhythm of scrubbing, sweeping, and polishing, a stark contrast to the frenetic hustle of the offices above. Sam possessed neither grand titles nor an exorbitant salary, but his eyes, accustomed to observing the details most ignored, captured the essence of the people and the environment around him. He saw the masks the executives wore, the unspoken tensions, the small gestures that revealed much more than words. His humility was not a weakness, but a lens through which he perceived the true nature of power and ambition. That same afternoon, when Jake fired the manager, Sam was cleaning the man's office. On the floor, near the trash can, he noticed a small fallen photo frame depicting a smiling family. It was evident that it had been knocked over in haste or anger. Sam carefully picked it up, dusted it off, and placed it on the desk, away from the trash, a small act of respect for a life that had just been turned upside down. Moments later, while wiping down the hallway, he heard raised voices coming from Jake's office. It was the billionaire boss and his partner, Max, arguing heatedly. The words were muffled, but the anger and frustration were palpable. Sam didn't need to hear the details to understand the dynamics. He had already witnessed countless power struggles in those corridors. He simply continued his work, a silent observer at the epicenter of a corporate hurricane. His presence almost imperceptible, but his perception keen and profound. He was the shadow that saw everything, the invisible link connecting the two opposing worlds of Skyline. A simple man with a wisdom that money could not buy and power could not corrupt. The tension between Jake and his partner Max was like an invisible electric current running through the corridors of Skyline, felt by everyone but rarely openly discussed. It was not merely a disagreement about business guidelines, it was a bitter rivalry rooted in a past betrayal that corroded the foundation of their partnership. Max, a man with more flexible principles than Jake, yet with his own sense of justice, carried a deep wound. He accused Jake of stealing the original idea that catapulted them to billion-dollar success, an innovation that, according to Max, was the result of a collaboration, but which Jake had claimed entirely, using his ego and influence to erase Max's contribution. That afternoon, the argument in Jake's office escalated to a level of animosity that made even the closest aides hold their breath. "You've always been a parasite, Jake," Max shouted, his voice echoing off the soundproof walls. "You took my idea, my sweat, and turned it into your personal empire." Jake, with his icy calm, responded with a condescending smile. "Your sweat? You were there to hold my pen, Max. The vision, the execution, it all came from me." The exchange of barbs was more than a power struggle. It was a battle for recognition, for a truth distorted by time and ambition. Max, though ethical in some aspects, was equally ambitious, and his anger was fueled by perceived injustice. The company, which was supposed to be the pinnacle of their collaboration, had become the battlefield of a personal war, where loyalty was a worthless currency, and trust a distant memory. Sam, outside, felt the vibration of anger through the walls, a constant reminder that, even at the top of the corporate food chain, humanity was still capable of pettiness and betrayal. Skyline was not just a business, it was a stage for a complex human drama, where the protagonists were about to have their lives turned upside down by an improbable plan. The argument with Max left Jake in a state of restrained fury. He needed a way to humiliate his partner, to prove that he was the master of the game, that money and manipulation were his most powerful tools. As he walked through the corridors of Skyline, his mind buzzed with plans for revenge. It was then that his eyes landed on Sam, the janitor, who was diligently cleaning a stain on the floor. The humble and almost invisible figure of Sam ignited a wicked idea, struck him in Jake's mind. A bold, almost insane idea began to take shape. "I'll turn the most invisible man in this company into the man everyone wants to be," Jake thought, a cruel smile forming on his lips. It would be the perfect provocation, the masterstroke that would destabilize Max and reaffirm his own supremacy. The plan was simple in its audacity. Jake would have Sam pose as a billionaire heir interested in acquiring Skyline. The news of a mysterious and extremely wealthy buyer emerging from nowhere would certainly cause a stir and force Max into a position of vulnerability. Jake envisioned the scene. Max, the man who considered himself so cunning, being deceived by a janitor. The humiliation would be complete. For Jake, it was not just a game of power, but an assertion of his own ability to shape reality, to prove that he could transform anyone into anything as long as he had the resources to do so. He saw Sam not as a human being, but as a chess piece, an instrument for his own purposes. The charade would be a spectacle, and Jake would be the director, pulling the strings behind the scenes. However, he did not foresee that this dangerous wager would not only turn Max's world upside down, but also unearth shocking truths about himself and the true worth of a man. Jake summoned Sam to his office the next day, an invitation the janitor received with a mix of surprise and apprehension. Never before had he been called to the sanctuary of the billionaire boss. Upon entering, Sam noticed the opulence of the place, but his eyes focused on the imposing figure of Jake, who observed him with unusual intensity. Without beating around the bush, Jake laid out his outrageous proposal. Sam was to pose as a billionaire heir, a certain Leonard, interested in acquiring Skyline. Initially, Sam categorically refused. "My worth is not in the clothes I wear, sir," he said, his voice calm but firm, reflecting a dignity that Jake rarely encountered in his subordinates. The idea of deceiving people, of living a lie, went against everything he believed in. Jake, accustomed to having his wishes fulfilled, did not give up. He realized that money alone would not sway Sam. It was then that he played his lowest yet most effective card. "I know that your daughter, Sophia, needs an extremely expensive experimental treatment that health insurance doesn't cover," Jake said, his voice now softer, almost seductive. "I can ensure she receives the best available treatment anywhere in the world, all expenses paid. You just need to accept this role." Sam's heart sank. Sophia, his only daughter, was battling a rare disease, and every day was a struggle. Jake's proposal was a deal with the devil, but Sophia's life was at stake. He looked at the billionaire boss, at the calculated coldness in his eyes, and knew he was cornered. With a heavy sigh, the dignity of a father prevailing over his aversion to deceit, Sam accepted. The price of the charade would be his soul, but the benefit would be his daughter's life. Jake smiled, a smile of victory, unaware that he had just ignited a spark of change he would never be able to control. Sam's transformation into Leonard was a meticulous process, and for the janitor, profoundly uncomfortable. It wasn't just about wearing expensive suits and luxury watches. It was about unlearning himself and embodying a persona that was the antithesis of everything he stood for. Jake assigned a team of image, etiquette, and financial consultants to shape Sam into the perfect billionaire heir. Sam underwent intensive lessons on fine wines, modern art, the stock market, and the intricate genealogy of the fictional Leonard family, an invented lineage to lend credibility to his new identity. He learned to walk, talk, and even think like someone who had never known scarcity. Each lesson was a painful reminder of the charade he was living. He practiced his flawless accent in front of the mirror, rehearsed evasive answers to questions about his privileged childhood, and memorized details about companies that never existed. With each step, he felt the weight of the lie accumulating, a layer of falsehood that threatened to suffocate his true essence. However, the image of Sophia, his daughter, in his mind was the fuel that drove him. Whenever guilt or fatigue threatened to overpower him, he remembered Sophia's fragile smile and the promise of a treatment that could save her. The transformation was both physical and mental, but Sam's soul remained intact, watching from within that new shell. He was becoming a brilliant actor, but with each performance, the line between Sam and Leonard grew thinner, and he wondered if he would ever find the way back to himself. The metamorphosis was complete, and the stage was set for Leonard's entrance into the world of the great, a world where truth was a rare commodity and appearance was everything. The debut of Leonard was at a high-level business dinner, an event meticulously orchestrated by Jake to introduce his fake heir to the market sharks, including Max. Sam, now impeccably dressed in a tailored suit and exuding a forged confidence, felt the weight of curious and evaluative gazes. The environment was a minefield of superficial conversations and veiled power plays. He almost ruined everything by referring to an expensive wine with the simplicity of someone describing grape juice, but quickly corrected himself, remembering his etiquette lessons. The hypocrisy and artificiality of the interactions were almost palpable, and Sam, with his keen sensitivity, felt like an alien in the midst of that nest of vipers. Max, always insightful, observed Leonard with a veiled suspicion. He attempted to corner Sam with tricky questions about his supposed lineage and investments. Sam, however, surprised everyone. Instead of sticking to rehearsed answers, he used a story from his real life, disguising it as a business anecdote about the importance of resilience and hard work, something he had learned from sweeping floors and fixing leaks. His narrative, though simple, resonated with an unexpected authenticity amidst that sea of falsehood. The investors, weary of empty corporate rhetoric, were genuinely impressed. Sam wasn't playing their game, he was changing it, unintentionally, with his truth. He didn't know about mergers and acquisitions like a billionaire, but he knew about real life, about struggle and perseverance, and that wisdom, paradoxically, made him more credible than any fabricated fortune. Jake watched, a hint of surprise mixed with satisfaction. The janitor was performing better than expected, and Max, for the first time, seemed genuinely intrigued, not just suspicious. The charade was taking on a life of its own, and Sam, the janitor, was becoming a force to be reckoned with, not for his fictitious wealth, but for his undeniable humanity. As Leonard gained prominence in the corporate scene, Sam began to experience the allure of power and money in a way he never imagined. People who once ignored him or barely noticed him in the corridors of Skyline now treated him with reverent respect, almost flattery. Doors were opening, favors were offered, and his words, once inaudible, now carried weight and influence. He was invited to exclusive events, dinners with important figures, and had access to privileged information that was once worlds away from his reality as a janitor. Each day, the line between Sam and Leonard became thinner, and he felt the temptation to lose himself in that new identity. The material comfort was undeniable: the tailored clothes, the luxury cars, the freedom from worrying about bills or Sophia's treatment. But the temptation went beyond the material. It was the feeling of being heard, of being important, of having the power to influence decisions. He saw the sparkle in people's eyes when he spoke, the way they went out of their way to please him. It was a stark contrast to the invisibility of his previous life. An internal conflict began to form. He was doing it for Sophia, yes, but a part of him was starting to enjoy that new world, that new self. The integrity he so valued was being tested. He found himself thinking about how it would be if it were all real, if he truly were Leonard. The charade, which began as a sacrifice, was becoming a gilded trap, and Sam needed to fight to not forget who he truly was and the original purpose of his mission. The temptation of power was a subtle poison, and he knew he had to remain vigilant to avoid being completely consumed by it. The tension between Jake and Max was palpable, a dangerous dance of power and secrets. Max, in his quest for revenge, had unearthed a dark secret from Jake's past, something that could destroy his reputation and his empire. It was a financial scandal, a scheme of fund misappropriation that Jake had orchestrated years ago, even before the founding of Skyline, and which he had skillfully covered up. Max possessed irrefutable evidence, documents and recordings that incriminated Jake undeniably. He planned to use this information to bring down Jake and take full control of Skyline, not just out of revenge, but also driven by an insatiable thirst for power. Meanwhile, Sam, in his new persona as Leonard, was dangerously approaching the truth. His sensitivity and his ability to observe details that others overlooked led him to notice inconsistencies in the stories of Jake and Max. He realized that the rivalry between the two was deeper than a simple power struggle, and that there was more at stake than the acquisition of Skyline. Sam, with his practical intelligence, began piecing together the puzzle, unaware that he was about to uncover a secret that could shake the foundations of the company and change the fate of everyone involved. The farce of Leonard was becoming a catalyst for the revelation of buried truths, and Sam, the janitor, was about to become the pivot of an unforeseen twist. Max's dark secret was a ticking time bomb, and time was running out for Jake. The tension at Skyline reached its peak. Max, impatient and eager for his victory, called an emergency meeting with the board of directors, intending to expose Jake and take control of the company. He had prepared a meticulous presentation with all the evidence of Jake's financial scandal. However, what Max did not expect was Sam's intervention. The janitor, who had become a master in the art of observation and deduction, had discovered the truth about Jake's past and Max's intention to use it for his own rise. Sam knew that if Max revealed the secret, Skyline would be destroyed and many innocent people would be harmed. At the crucial moment of the meeting, when Max was about to start his presentation, Sam, with surprising calmness, asked to speak. He did not reveal Jake's secret, nor Max's intentions. Instead, he spoke about the importance of integrity, honesty, and collaboration. He told a story, a parable, about building a structure where every brick, no matter how small, was essential for the solidity of the building. He talked about the importance of building on a solid foundation of trust rather than on the shifting sands of secrets and betrayals. His words, although indirect, struck Jake and Max deeply. Jake, for the first time, felt the weight of his actions and the shame of his manipulation. Max, on the other hand, realized the futility of his revenge and the damage it would cause to the company he had also helped to build. The truth, for both, did not come from a public exposure, but from an internal reflection provoked by Sam's wise words. The meeting ended without the revelation of the scandal, but with a new understanding of the importance of ethics and responsibility. The breaking point had been reached, and Skyline was about to embark on a new path. After the meeting, Jake and Max met in Jake's office, a confrontation that was inevitable. The atmosphere was charged with emotion, a mix of anger, regret, and a strange sense of relief. For the first time, Jake was not in his icy and calculating demeanor. He was visibly shaken by Sam's words and the near exposure of his past. At the crucial moment of the meeting, when Max was about to start his presentation, Sam, with surprising calmness, asked to speak. He did not reveal Jake's secret, nor Max's intentions. Instead, he spoke about the importance of integrity, honesty, and collaboration. He told a story, a parable about building a structure where every brick, no matter how small, was essential for the solidity of the building. He talked about the importance of building on a solid foundation of trust, rather than on the shifting sands of secrets and betrayals. His words, although indirect, struck Jake and Max deeply. Jake, for the first time, felt the weight of his actions and the shame of his manipulation. Max, on the other hand, realized the futility of his revenge and the damage it would cause to the company he had also helped to build. The truth, for both, did not come from a public exposure, but from an internal reflection provoked by Sam's wise words. The meeting ended without the revelation of the scandal, but with a new understanding of the importance of ethics and responsibility. The breaking point had been reached, and Skyline was about to embark on a new path. After the meeting, Jake and Max met in Jake's office, a confrontation that was inevitable. The atmosphere was charged with emotion, a mix of anger, regret, and a strange sense of relief. For the first time, Jake was not in his icy and calculating demeanor. He was visibly shaken by Sam's words and the near exposure of his past. Max, on the other hand, was disarmed by Sam's unexpected attitude and the realization that his revenge would not bring the satisfaction he had anticipated. "You knew, didn't you?" Jake asked Max, his voice low, "about what I did." Max nodded, and then, to Jake's surprise, he did not attack him. Instead, he spoke about his own pain, about the betrayal he felt, and how the quest for revenge had consumed him. Jake, listening to Max's words, realized he was not the only one carrying a burden. He confessed his mistakes, his relentless pursuit of power, and his inability to trust anyone. It was a moment of vulnerability and brutal honesty between the two men who had been enemies for years. The guise of Leonard had forced Jake to confront his own humanity and Max to reconsider his priorities. The final confrontation was not a battle, but a catharsis, a moment of liberation for both. They did not become friends overnight, but the seed of a new relationship based on truth and respect had been planted. The Skyline and its leaders were on the brink of profound transformation. With the truth revealed and the confrontation between Jake and Max concluded, Sam found himself at a crossroads. The Leonard ruse had served its purpose. Sophia was receiving the treatment she needed, and Skyline had been saved from a devastating scandal. He could simply vanish, return to his life as a janitor, and leave the corporate world behind. However, Sam had changed. He had experienced the power of his voice, the influence of his wisdom, and the ability to make a difference. He was no longer the invisible man sweeping the halls. He was the man who had unmasked hypocrisy and planted the seeds of change. Jake, in a gesture of gratitude and recognition, offered Sam a prominent position at Skyline, a role that would grant him real power and influence. Max, on the other hand, offered him a partnership in a new venture, an opportunity to build something from scratch, based on principles of ethics and transparency. Sam, however, declined both offers. He knew that his place wasn't at the top of the corporate hierarchy, nor in the business world. His place was where he could continue to be an observer, a catalyst for change, a constant reminder that true wealth wasn't in money or power, but in integrity and humanity. He chose to continue as a janitor, but with a new mission, to be Skyline's conscience, the guardian of its values. Sam's choice wasn't a renunciation, but an affirmation of his true identity and purpose. He had found his place in the world, not as a fictional billionaire, but as a simple man with extraordinary wisdom. The silence in the meeting room after Sam's speech was broken by Max. He approached Jake not with the anger or bitterness from before, but with an expression of deep reflection. Jake's confession in Sam's wisdom had touched something in Max that money and power never could. He extended his hand to Jake, a gesture that years ago would have been unthinkable. "Jake," Max said, his voice choked, I don't know what to say. I've hated you for so long, for something I myself helped create." The honesty of Jake and the humility of Sam had disarmed the old rivalry. Jake shook Max's hand, a firm grip that sealed not just forgiveness, but the beginning of a new partnership. "We both made mistakes, Max," Jake replied, feeling a weight lifted from his shoulders. "But we can fix this. We can build something new, something better, based on truth and mutual respect." Max, moved by Jake's sincerity, suggested, "How about we start anew, not as rivals, but as true partners? Skyline needs a new foundation, and I believe that with what we've learned today, we can build it." The meeting room, once a stage for intrigues and power plays, now witnessed a moment of genuine reconciliation. The company, which was on the brink of a fictitious acquisition, was about to undergo a much deeper and real transformation. The presence of Sam, the janitor who had exposed everyone, was the catalyst for this change. The reconciliation between Jake and Max was not just the end of an old dispute, but the herald of a new chapter for Skyline, a chapter where authenticity and collaboration would be the pillars, not manipulation and rivalry. True wealth, they finally understood, was not in financial statements, but in human relationships. Months had passed since the memorable meeting at Skyline, and the company, once a bastion of corporate coldness, had transformed into a vibrant and humane environment. Jake, the once relentless billionaire boss, now led with an empathy and active listening that surprised everyone. The doors of his office, once always closed, were now open, and he not only listened to his employees, but actively sought their opinions and suggestions. Decisions were made more collaboratively, and the atmosphere of fear and competition had been replaced by a sense of community and shared purpose. The change was not merely superficial, it was a profound cultural transformation, driven by Jake's new stance and the quiet influence of Sam. Jake, in a gesture that sealed his redemption, established a foundation to assist the families of Skyline's workers, funded with his own money. The foundation provided educational support, medical assistance, and wellness programs, ensuring that no employee suffered the hardships Sam had faced with Sophia. It was a tangible acknowledgement that the company's success relied on the well-being of its employees. The partnership with Max also flourished, now based on mutual respect and a shared vision for the future. They worked side by side, complementing each other's strengths, and Skyline was stronger and more ethical than ever. The new beginning was not only for Jake, but for the entire company, which had found a new purpose beyond profit, to be a place where people were valued and where humanity prevailed over blind ambition. The ice tower had begun to melt, revealing a heart beating to a more compassionate rhythm. As the transformation of Skyline was in full swing, Jake made Sam an offer that many would consider irresistible, a high-level executive position with a salary and benefits that far exceeded his most ambitious dreams. However, Sam, with his unwavering wisdom, declined. He had experienced the allure of power and the seduction of money, and he knew that his true worth wasn't in a title or an inflated bank account. He chose to remain a janitor, but his role in the company had changed drastically. He was no longer the invisible. He was the unofficial advisor to Jake, the guardian of the company's soul. Sam continued to sweep the hallways and clean the offices, but now every employee, from intern to director, greeted him with genuine respect. They knew his story, the deception he had helped to uncover, and the critical role he played in Jake's redemption and the company's transformation. He was the constant reminder that humility and integrity were as valuable as intelligence and ambition. Jake often sought him out, not to discuss business strategies, but to seek advice on human issues, such as dealing with team conflicts or how to maintain high morale. Sam, with his unique perspective, offered insights that no management consultant could provide. He was the company's thermometer, feeling the pulse of the environment and alerting Jake to any signs of imbalance. His presence was a constant reminder that true leadership was not about domination, but about service. Sam found his power in being exactly who he was, a simple man who, with his authenticity, had moved mountains and transformed hearts. He was the custodian who became the conscience of Skyline, a beacon of values in a world that often forgot them. The video ends with a simple yet profoundly symbolic scene. It's not in Jake's luxurious office, nor in a high-tech meeting room. It's in the employee break area, a space that was once neglected but is now vibrant and welcoming. Jake and Sam are sitting at a simple table, drinking coffee from ordinary mugs. There are no expensive suits or formalities. Jake has his shirt sleeves rolled up, and Sam, in his janitorial uniform, is smiling. They talk not about business or profits, but about life, about their families, about the small challenges and joys of everyday life. The hierarchy that once separated them had vanished, replaced by genuine friendship and mutual respect. Jake laughs at a joke by Sam, a sound rarely heard in his days as a ruthless billionaire boss. Sam, in turn, offers practical advice on fixing a leak in the pantry faucet, and Jake listens attentively without a hint of condescension. They are no longer boss and employee, but two friends who saved each other, each in their own way. Jake found his humanity, and Sam his purpose. The camera slowly pulls back, revealing the skyline in the background, a glass tower that, from the outside, still appeared imposing and cold, but inside pulsed with new life, a new spirit. The true wealth, the true strength of the company was not in its financial statements or technological innovations, but in the human connection that Jake and Sam had built, a bond proving that humility and dignity were the most solid pillars for any empire. The story ends with the image of the two men, the living proof that transformation is possible and that the most valuable lessons can come from the most unexpected places.